Hi everyone. I hope you're enjoying this composition series as much as I'm enjoying making it. In my opinion, good composition is the most important factor in creating compelling underwater images. Definitely more important than the quality and expense of your camera setup, and often more important than how rare or unusual of a subject you see underwater. Some of my favorite images have been taken with a simple compact camera and housing, often without a strobe or video light, and sometimes without an add-on macro or wide-angle lens. And that's why it's so much fun talking about and thinking about composition in our underwater images. And remember, this is just my opinion. It's art, not science, and you are always the ultimate judge of your images. So let's check out some images now talking about simplicity. Thanks for tuning in. This is Composition Episode 8, Simplify. In general, when we shoot an image, the subject should be immediately obvious, or people might lose interest. Keeping the scene simple is one important way to highlight your subject. When you take a picture, you must remember that the camera doesn't know what you want us to look at. It captures everything in front of us, which can lead to a busy, cluttered image with no clear subject and many distracting elements. What are we supposed to look at here? Is it the angelfish, the diver behind it, the light from the camera strobe, the surrounding coral, the seafloor, or even the bright red coral behind the fish but in front of the diver? I think there's just too much going on here and the image is sort of disjointed. Whereas, in my opinion, this image is much more appealing. Now, I immediately focus on the angelfish dominating the scene with the well-positioned diver right behind the angelfish looking at it. This keeps our attention directed at the fish. In addition, there aren't many other annoying or distracting elements competing for our attention. Now, simplicity doesn't only apply to wide angle or shooting multiple subjects. Here is a macro shot of just a single shrimp. The image doesn't contain any other surrounding distracting elements other than the shrimp, but in my opinion, so many parts of the shrimp are in focus, I'm still not sure what to look at. The pinchers, the front or back legs, the eyes, the antennae, the back part of the body. It's kind of messy and disorderly. Similarly, the beautiful eye of the scorpionfish is framed in the upper left according to the rule of thirds. The eye is beautiful and an excellent focus, but I think it's kind of lost competing with the surrounding bright colors and textures on the surrounding parts of the fish's face, resulting in sort of an untidy image. Whereas this image is much better. The size, focus, and position of the eye in the frame are the same as in the last image, but now the remainder of the image is much cleaner and less distracting without the multiple confusing elements shown in the previous image. In fact, the whole color is an appealing yellow. I like it. Now, having too much clutter or content in our image can make it difficult to find the main subject. The observer might keep searching for a point of focus and eventually get bored. Sometimes there's just too many things going on in the foreground or background, like all the surrounding different multicolored corals here. We don't really know what the single obvious highlight of our image is. When we look at our picture, we should ask ourselves if all the elements in the scene add to the image. If not, then in general it's probably best to exclude those elements and concentrate on the main thing. Now, one way to handle this is to wait for the scene to change. Okay, wait for the subject or subject positioning and balance to change. Now, this beautiful shark was surrounded by just too much activity. Various fishes are in different parts of the frame, swimming in seemingly random directions. Okay, the diver at the lower left, unfortunately I snapped the shutter when he was expelling bubbles. He's kind of vertically profiled. I think he's taking a picture of the shark, but it's not obvious. And then there's another diver in the lower right hand of the corner. What are we supposed to look at in this image? Now, one important thing we can do is, instead of just blast away like I did, rather wait for the scene to change. Now, this image is a little better, but not much. It's still kind of disjointed. However, I was patient and watched as the shark swam and circled around for a while. I waited until it swam on the other side of the reef where the fishes and my fellow divers were not present. And now, with these other elements out of the way, I got this simple image of a single shark swimming along the sandy seafloor with some sparse growth and a few simple rocks. The shark is actually farther away from me, but I think the overall image is much better because it's simple. Another way to simplify the scene, as we already talked about earlier in the Getting Close video, has already been discussed, but I'll repeat it briefly. I watched a while, the shark swam back and forth. My dive buddies and the surrounding smaller fishes were kind of out of the scene now. The shark swam closer to me, and as I just hovered motionless and waited, I got this simple image of a shark with no other distractions, and I think it's much better. Same thing with this situation. The background inside this beautiful wreck in North Carolina was just too busy. There's way too much going on, too much clutter. I just waited until the shark got closer to me, and I was able to eliminate all the distractions. Now, we already talked about getting low and shooting up, with viewpoint to eliminate a distracting background, as seen in this nudibranch here in Indonesia. Much better when you can get low and shoot up. There's other ways to eliminate a distracting background, which I'm going to talk about in much more detail in upcoming videos. Now here there was a very messy background, but I opened up my aperture to minimize my depth of field, focused right on the eyes of this little fish, and eliminated most of the messy background by blurring it. Here I used a very small aperture and a very fast shutter speed to make the otherwise busy background appear black. The background is now black and not distracting, and the ghost pipefish here in Indonesia pop out. With macro, if you're close to the subject, your strobe can also be directed toward the camera such that the cone of light illuminates the subject and not the surrounding background. And I'm going to show more on this on a later video. Now, another thing, just because the composition is simple, it doesn't mean it has to be boring. Sometimes the subject itself is so cool that nothing else needs to be emphasized, as in this super macro image of the eye of a conch. But we can use other elements of composition to make a very simple composition still a little more interesting. One thing we can do is emphasize color, or line, or texture, as we see here, or we could emphasize pattern, or symmetry. And remember, all these images are still pretty simple. Whatever we show, the viewer should quickly know what the main highlight is. And remember, when we create interesting and compelling images, composition is more important in this than the quality and expense of your camera. And I don't even think you need to have a really exciting or rare subject. Sometimes you can make your image interesting by just keeping it simple, as in this seaweed here. So thank you so much for your attention. I hope you found this video helpful.